Thank you very much. Very nice to see so many familiar faces here. We very warmly welcome you, our audience, but also our candidates. So we have all 6 parties represented here tonight. So thank you very much for coming along. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the invite.
You're welcome. I'd just like to thank Magella and her team as well for organising this space for us, which has been absolutely fantastic, setting up the whole room. So our grateful thanks to her and her team. Thank you. A couple of points of housekeeping. In the event of the fire alarm going off, there's a fire exit right at the back and a fire exit the way you came in as well. And the loos, if you haven't found them already, there's one on this floor a little bit further down and one on the second floor. So Friends of Eastbourne Seafront started 15 months ago. During our campaign to get the bandstand repaired and reopened, we realised through talking to people how important the whole of the seafront from Holywell to the harbour was to residents, visitors and businesses. We want improvements to our seafront. We want our historic buildings reopened, and we want a vibrant, clean seafront, one that encourages tourism and makes Eastbourne a great place to live, not a seafront that gives the impression that it's run down and neglected. So Friends of Eastbourne Seafront are doing our bit, and this year we've written our seafront guide once again. We've established our welcome team, which is now 44 people strong, and we're in the throes of getting a children's cycle track organised down by the skate park. So it's really great this year to have seen the bandstand reopening, funding for Redoubt, new signage, improved lighting, new lampposts, and new bins arriving any day. All in this election year, of course. Eastbourne Borough Council officers and staff are very dedicated and they work very hard. Visit Eastbourne organise really great events for the town, but it's councillors that make the decisions. Local elections are in just 2 weeks. When it comes to voting, we need to be well informed so that we can make informed choices. We want to know that the candidates we vote for have the same priorities as we do. This is about local issues, not politics. Of course, there are important issues throughout the town, but we are Friends of Eastbourne Seafront, and tonight we are focusing on the seafront and on tourism. So the format for this evening, I'm going to ask our candidates one by one to stand up and speak for 3 minutes, to introduce themselves and speak about their own seafront and tourism policies. So this whole process has been very fair and even, and to be fair and even, we've got a bucket acting as a hat, and I'm going to be drawing names out, so we're not going in order. It'll be whoever I pull out will go first. Following that, I'll be asking the people who have submitted questions. We had a great number of questions, and I thank you very much for everybody who submitted them. But we won't have the time to answer them all. We'll do our best to answer quite a lot. So the people who have been asked, their questions have been accepted, then they know about that. So don't think we're going to spring the microphone on you at any moment. So I'm going to start by pulling a name out of the bucket. So could Robert Smart, Conservative, please stand and introduce yourself?
Robert Smart, Conservative councillor for Meads and candidate for Meads in the current election. Time to go?
Yeah.
Hello, it's working, Chris. Thank you again, and good evening, everyone. First, I want to applaud the tremendous achievements you, Friends of Eastbourne Seafront and Save the Bandstand Group have realised over the past 14 or 15 months, including this important meeting. I was at the bandstand on 30th January last year, being interviewed by the BBC, when you came together and have been delighted to support you ever since, ensuring you had a platform and were able to address full council when the Liberal Democrat administration didn't want to listen. They have been forced to do so. Remember your slogan, Eastbourne Bandstand closed due to negligence by Eastbourne Borough Council. Negligence over 16 years. The example of the seafront lighting has been shocking, and it needs a comprehensive renewal and just piecemeal replacement. That's my first pledge. So to the future. I was delighted to listen to your most impressive presentation, Gaynor, to the Eastbourne Society last week. I agree wholeheartedly with your sentiments, which included a lot of detail. I wish I had as long to speak as you now, but I've only 2 minutes, but hopefully longer through questions. Tourism is clearly of profound importance to Eastbourne, and our tourist attractions are predominantly, but not exclusively, located on our wonderful seafront. These amenities are also important to our 100,000 plus residents and are often a significant factor in relocation to Eastbourne. From Sovereign Harbour to the South Downs National Park, we have 4 to 5 miles of uniquely designed seafront promenades. Out to sea, the area has been designated as a marine conservation zone. In between, we have a collection of iconic historic buildings such as the Bandstand, the Redoubt Fortress, the Wish Tower and the Pier, along with more modern amenities. Adjacent to the seafront is a unique collection of facilities in the Devonshire Quarter here, including the world-renowned tennis facility, theatres, art gallery, winter garden and conference centre. Wow, what a wealth of jewels with which to rejuvenate Eastbourne. Our vision is one of evolution, not revolution. We must start by bringing back into use the existing assets with credible maintenance programmes over the next few years, and necessary works being undertaken in the off-season. The false excuse provided by the Environment Agency's Seafront Protection Scheme has faded away as predicted. Major challenges are to develop the connectivity of the seafront and reduce the seasonality of our tourism business. To gain the full potential of our conference facilities, we need to increase the quality of our hotel rooms. As a former hotel group chairman, I have introduced the council to one of the leading hospitality consultancies. They are now advising the council on how to stimulate this, including introductions to branded hotel groups. A reduction in the number of hotel rooms on offer may be desirable, as well as the increase in quality. The geographical extent of the tourist retention zone should be reviewed. No one has a monopoly of visionary ideas, and we should listen to all who can contribute. I will refer to one such party. I have been working with my friend and Conservative peer, Lord Ralph Lucas, who has introduced the Eden Project to Eastbourne. You may be familiar with the world-famous Eden Project in Cornwall, which is credited with creating over 2 billion of tourist income for Cornwall, with great emphasis on the environment. Having brought the various parties together, Eden have completed the first phase in defining the Eastbourne project. Their initial idea is very different to their offering in Cornwall. Their suggested approach is a multi-destination model incorporating 4 main sites in 3 locations. The seafront, particularly around Fort Fun, the levels and the downs, including Beachy Head. When I walked along these locations with their creative team, they were blown away by the potential. They are excited by the possibilities, extremely consultative and environmentally sensitive.
Thank you, Robert. We
should grasp this opportunity, and I know that Eden will want to receive input from you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul Richards.
Hello, can you hear me in the back? Okay, will you give me a time?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you. My name is Paul Richards. I'm part of the Labour team standing on the 4th of May. Gaynor, thank you so much for tonight, and thank you to the Friends for hosting the event. I was saying before the event, a turnout like this for a local election meeting is quite a stunning thing, and it shows the passion and the dedication that there is in the room and beyond. We believe in a new leadership for Eastbourne and a fundamental reboot of the town after austerity, COVID and the cost of living crisis, and that has particularly affected the hospitality and the tourism industry. And so we've got a 5-point plan for tourism in Eastbourne, and the first bit of it is to say the businesses here, the tourism businesses, need an immediate emergency package of support, including a cut to business rates and also action on late payments, which are absolutely the death to small businesses. Second, we want councils like Eastbourne to have new powers to take over empty shops and other empty premises and to open them straight away, breathing new life into the retail areas that are also part of the tourist offer that we need to offer to people. 3, more to tackle antisocial behaviour, and particularly noise, graffiti, people hanging around. And we do need, I think, more neighbourhood policing teams, particularly patrolling the seafront, including PCSOs, and also action to tackle the behaviours and the acts which mean that the beach is not safe for women in particular. For this issue of transport connectivity, I mean, we have to get the tourists here in the first place. Southern Rail has failed. I am someone who relies on the trains, and I can tell you they fail on a regular basis. But the roads too are unsafe, and the potholes are a disgrace. And for anyone with a buggy or a mobility scooter or even pedestrians, even the Dotto train was delayed. And so we do need integrated transport to get the tourists here. 5 of my plan is a cleaner and greener town. Safer parks. I would call for a return to park keepers with a uniformed presence in the parks, reclaim those for the families, cleaner air, and yes, stop the sewage being pumped into the sea, because you're not going to get tourists to come to the sea if they don't think it's clean. There has been a failure of leadership and a lack of vision. And if you want proof, just come for a walk along the seafront, the crumbling, boarded up winter gardens, the redoubt, once a tourist attraction with the model village, now an eyesore, even the bandstand. I'm glad it's opening, but why was it closed for quite so long, all the way through the summer season? And why was Eastbourne's bid for the levelling up funding turned down? Has our local MP really got so little clap with Michael Gove? And why did the council leave out the seafront altogether from its original levelling up bid? These are questions we might have the answers to tonight. Finally, what about the shambles of Fisherman's Green, a much-loved recreational space at risk from councillors who fail to stand up to their own officers? Yes, these are the jewels in the crown, Robert, but the current councillors, I think, have failed to properly look after them. There was a notable Eastbourne resident who said that England was a family with the wrong members in control. I feel the same about Eastbourne. It is a family, but it's got the wrong members in control, and that's why we're saying we need new leadership, a new approach, and a fresh start. Thank you.
So, Ian Garbutt, UKIP.
Good evening, and thank you very much for the invite. I represent the UK Independence Party, and one of our points that we campaign strongly on is that we want to listen to the people. Unfortunately, Eastbourne has been led by a party, political group, and too many of our local councillors have been sidelined and simply vote along party lines. We need to bring democracy back to Eastbourne. When I first moved to Eastbourne 37 years ago, there was a thriving organisation called Eastbourne Ratepayers Society, and they did quite a lot to hold the council to do what the people of Eastbourne wanted. And I've joined your organisation. I won't mention politics at all, but I joined because I feel you as an organisation will start to do things that organisation did in the 70s and 80s. The seafront is a major asset, and it has been totally neglected. I walk regularly from Fisherman's up to Holywell and back, and only on Sunday I walked along there. The benches, which are nice wrought iron frames and wooden slats, paint peeling, rotten wood. All the railings were painted blue, but there's more bare metal and glue. The bandstand, totally neglected, and that is a prime asset that has to be looked after. They've done a wonderful job spending money on this Devonshire Park complex and theatres, the council. But when I looked last year, they had an original budget of 42 million, upped it to 44 million, spent 58.5 million and admit that they still need at least another 4 million to spend on the winter gardens. As a businessman, if I'd done a major project and I'd gone 10% over budget, I would have expected to be sacked. They've gone 40% over budget. Sewerage, again, a major issue, right along the south coast. And the problem is, we hear lots of MPs and their councillors talking to Southern Water. But last year, Southern Water got fined £150,000. They need to spend 50 million, but they still gave the directors £30.3 million in bonuses. It's crazy, absolutely crazy, and destroying one of our prime assets. The other issue that I would like to take up is looking at hotels and the tourist information area. We have a lovely tourist information office tucked away up here by the theatre. It used to be right in the centre of town where people got off the bus and 200 yards from the train station. To me, that's an absolute nonsense. And I actually did speak to quite a few people that I just asked them at random. Probably only half of them wanted to speak to me along the seafront. And I asked about the tourist information and they said, it's closed. How crazy is that? What is that doing to encourage tourism into Eastbourne?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. So we have Keith Gell now from Reform. Gel, sorry.
Yeah, hello, my name's Keith Gell, I'm standing for Reform. Our policy towards Eastbourne Seafront is one of decentralisation. We want to take away the power from the officials and the big companies and put it down into the small people who are trying to run little businesses. A good example of this is the kiosks. There's over 40 kiosks along Eastbourne Seafront and they're all run by one large company. What I suggest we do is that we organise a one kiosk, one person policy so that any person will be able to hire a kiosk from the council and set up their own small business. This will massively increase competition. We should also allow people to innovate. So for example, at the moment, a cup of tea from one kiosk is very similar to a cup of tea from another kiosk. When I spoke about this policy to a man called Solomon, he had the idea of having a kiosk that sells freshly squeezed fruit juice. It's a great idea. And there's lots of other ideas out there, but you won't get them from the council or from big companies. You'll get them from the population. And the way you tell a good idea from a bad idea is that a good idea will succeed and make money for that person. What I suggest is that each month, 1 or 2 kiosks will be auctioned at a fairly short lease from Eastbourne Borough Council. That auction will be open and transparent. All prices paid will be known by everyone. This will give access to huge numbers of people who would like to set up their own business but can't. It will make a business proposition affordable to them. I'd like to talk about Eastbourne Borough Council officials. they seem to be rather bossy. When I was growing up, we had a tram line in Eastbourne. It was a long time ago, it closed in 1969, but they had a little lease. That tram line lease was discontinued by Eastbourne Borough Council, and that tram now runs in Seaton, in Devon. That should be here. There was a chap I spoke to who ran a small motorcycle training company on Fisherman's Green. Eastbourne Borough Council officials stopped him using the car park late at night to train people. Why did they do that? Someone should actually stand up to these officials. A councillor should stand up to these officials. My bugbear is Airborne. It's too big. It costs £400,000 a year, and there's a shortfall of £125,000 which needs to be picked up by the taxpayer. That's a huge amount of money. You could run large numbers of much smaller projects with £125,000 and leverage more people's ideas. It's a bad idea. And why are we spending £125,000 on Airborne when I received this letter today from Eastbourne Food Bank, and they suggested the following proposals, which I totally agree with. An end to bailiff enforcement for all those in receipt of council tax reduction. Implement a 100% council tax reduction for people on the lowest incomes, those currently receiving an 80% reduction. Why isn't there a 100% reduction for those on the lowest incomes when we can afford to lose £125,000 worth on Airborne a year? That's £1,250 per Eastbourne resident.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Stephen Holt.
Good evening, everybody, and first of all, as everybody has done, but I will make sure I do, I want to thank Gaynor, of course, but of course everybody here tonight who's to hear about what's happening next, because whatever happens in 2 or 3 weeks' time or so, 16 days now, there'll be a new leader of the council, there'll be a new administration of the council, and it's only right that you all get to challenge us on what we see that vision being and how we want to support the town going forwards. I really want to thank as well the Friends of Eastbourne Seafront and also the many community groups I know are represented tonight in the room for continuing to push the agenda and push your agenda going forwards. That accountability is really important to myself, to my group, and I'm sure everybody who's elected. It's been a really challenging few years for this council. I'm not going to lie to you, I've said it often, I've said it many times in statements and everything else. We've had COVID, we've had cost of living, we've had government reductions in terms of the local support that they offer to councils and local authorities. But the town has responded amazingly, and it has been a real privilege to be part of that and working with community groups, with councillors, with officers as part of, if you like, Team Eastbourne, as opposed to just an individual. And tourism is really important to this town. 28% of jobs across Eastbourne are reliant upon the tourism economy here. It represents around a visitor spend of 530 million, and 5.46 million visitors attend Eastbourne a year. I've heard other speakers tonight already, and I want to say I love Eastbourne Seafront. I'm so proud of it. I'm so proud of what we do and the way we try to tackle these challenges. And what I've heard tonight has all been a little bit doom and gloom. And yet if you read the national press and the travellers press, they're all talking about the exciting things that are happening in Eastbourne and the fact that it is a destination town and it's a place to visit. Condé Nast, Times, Time Out are all talking up Eastbourne, and I think what I want to do as part of, if I'm selected and if I'm elected, is I want to bring that pride and that passion that I have for Eastbourne and try and work with everybody to give you that passion and give you that pride. And maybe communicate better, maybe make sure that you guys know more about what's happening, but actually, let's look at what people are saying about us and the excitement other people have about Eastbourne when they come and visit. And let's make sure we're replicating that, because that success will breed success. What I want to see from Eastbourne as well, and what I really want our council to focus on, is reducing that seasonality. You've heard it already from others. Eastbourne, particularly the hospitality trade, is very reliant on that kind of seasonal good weather. To quote the Friends of Eastbourne Seafront, but I'm going to do a little bit of an amendment, I'm afraid, Gaynor, is I'd like harbour to the Downs. You know, I think that whole stretch, it has to work together. It has to not be a patchwork. We've got to be coordinating our approach, include the Devonshire Park, and include the Congress, include the town centre, so that it's all working in harmony together, and you have that feeling of Eastbourne when you come through. There's some huge opportunities that are coming with the Towner, the Turner Prize, the things that we're supporting, but we can't do it alone. We really can't. And what I want to do is, a council cannot do everything. What I want to do is work with you to achieve what we all want, working collectively together. And you guys have already had huge success. You've got teams working on the carnival, you've got welcome groups, you've got the bike tracks coming here. Working together, we're so much stronger and we're so much better. Thank you.
And last but not least, Susan Kerrison from the Green Party.
Hello, I'm chair of the local Green Party, and I'm also standing as a candidate in the Sovereign Ward for the Green Party. Right, now, just let me set my clock. Oh, reset. Start. Yes? We have a big green plan for Eastbourne. And the big green plan for Eastbourne is to shut the seafront, the parades, the Marine Parade, the King's Parade, all the parades along there, from Sovereign Harbour to the other side maybe of the Grand Hotel, to all motor traffic except emergency vehicles and vehicles for people with disabilities. Yes, I expected that kind of reaction. Everywhere that has tried to control the car receives that type of reaction. But when they do it, nobody ever wants to go back. And I could give you a long list of cities who've gone down that route and they never want to go back. Now, what you do as well is you put a park and ride at both ends. Park and ride at the Sovereign Centre and a park and ride up in somewhere near Beachy Head. The space you create means you could have a two-way bus lane and a two-way cycle lane. So you could have a bus running all day up and down the prom, the electric bus, from the Sovereign Centre to Beachy Head. There wouldn't be any hold-ups. This would be a great advantage, not only to visitors, and like my colleague here was saying on the left, it would actually have some unity for the whole seafront all the way. But it would also be a great boon to the residents who actually live in Langney Point and Sovereign Harbour. At the moment, they are poorly served by any bus. And the census figures suggest that actually about 25% of people in Eastbourne don't have access to a car or van. So they get a pretty raw deal at the moment. To do this, of course, you would have to have a system of parking zones and parking permits for the streets, so there was no knock-on effect. But what it would do as well would be to make all those car parks along there redundant. So Fisherman's Green car park, Treasure Island, at the moment they're empty most of the year anyway, and that creates an enormous space for added attractions. For example, what about an urban beach? These are very popular on the continent, they're also very popular in the north of England. Have you ever heard of Costa del Solihull? You could have beach games, yes, it's funny, Costa del Solihull. Beach games, you maybe could have markets. It creates an end of space for a great deal of new attractions. I've nearly had my 3 minutes, but I'm going to finish by saying I lived in Eastbourne for 11 years now, and in some ways it's been greatly disappointing that things do not move on and change. It seems to me that people don't have a can-do attitude to actually bringing about radical changes will actually benefit the town enormously. And we really need to sort out the traffic, and we really need to have a can-do attitude to these really difficult problems, which many people who are here have outlined. They are difficult problems, and we need to think of radical solutions and have an attitude that is can-do to them.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, candidates, for your varied and interesting comments and ideas. Thank you. So we're going to go to the audience questions now, and the first one is to Brid Fellon, who's going to stand up and ask us the first question. Cheers.
Hi everyone. If you're elected, how would you encourage tourism in Eastbourne?
So Keith, would you respond to that?
As I say, I believe in decentralisation. So there are things that go on in Eastbourne each year. There's a board games festival that I go to at the Cumberland Hotel, where all the Londoners who are interested in board games come down to the Cumberland Hotel twice a year and have a board games festival. There's a steampunk festival, there's a beer festival. I think these things are best dealt with at very small scales, rather than trying to overarch the thing with a centralised tourism policy. Another example was the cosplay festival, which happens just behind us. That's the sort of thing I'd be looking for small things, for small people looking for niches. I think if you try and get too big, it won't work. That's more my feeling about the matter.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Could Stephen Holt answer that, please? If you were elected, how would you encourage tourism?
Yeah, thank you, Brid, and thank you for the question. It's probably the first one because it's probably the most important one. We've done that a lot, obviously. We work very closely with the Eastbourne Hospitality Association and indeed with other partners to talk about how we can best promote tourism, how we can best be an influence, and how can we be an enabler. That's what I want to see the council being. I want to see it being an enabler. We don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and frankly, hoteliers, event organisers and destination people are far more likely to have better ideas than a councillor and perhaps even senior officers. We want to work with you. So there'll be major attractions and major events that we'll continue and we'll keep working on. We'll keep investing in the theatres, we'll keep investing in our heritage buildings, we'll keep investing in our events. But one of the things I'm particularly pleased of is that through the Visit Eastbourne scheme and through the EHA partnership that we had with them as part of the Welcome Back funding, we've actually released £15,000 worth of grant funding to allow events to be brought up with, developed and co-opted by groups within the community. So whether that's EHA, whether that's Friends of Eastbourne Seafront, whether that's others, pulling sort of the power back to you so we can keep listening, we can keep working together on that tourism and event to make Eastbourne the premier destination that it is and keep that happening. So we'll be doing the big ticket stuff. You know, you won't see Airborne going under us if it remains economically sustainable, and you won't see the tennis going as long as we keep investing in this tennis centre. And so we'll keep our obligations going with magnificent motors and everything else, but what we want to do is work with you and work with people in this room to make it even better.
Thank you. Susan, would you like to comment?
Yeah, it's surprising I have some agreement with, I'm sorry, I can't remember Keith at the end there. I think as well that there needs to be an increase in diversity in Eastbourne, an enormous increase, because that's actually what gives it the energy. I'd also encourage tourism partly by what I said. You have to create a nice environment, and at the moment it's not a nice environment because the traffic just stifles everything. You know, if you're sitting on a hotel veranda along the Marine Parade there trying to have a cup of coffee, all you're looking out on is 2 rows of parked cars and a traffic jam. You know, this is not a nice environment. So I agree, you need diversity, you need things to start at a small scale, and I would also say I'm looking at an entirely white audience nearly, and one of the ways that diversity is increased is actually involving ethnic minorities within your planning process, diversities of food, street food, that sort of thing. So I would agree, small businesses and a great deal more diversity.
Thank you. Robert.
Thank you. To increase tourism in Eastbourne, let me say, first of all, you need a strategy, and we don't have a strategy. And I think that I have to segregate the past from the future, because the past, Eastbourne has become very run down, despite the fact that in certain areas which we applaud, such as the Turner Art Gallery obtaining the Turner Prize this year, such as the Port Hotel, there are pieces there which have done well in terms of getting there. But the general picture in terms of Eastbourne has been significantly run down, and we need, like urgently, a strategy for the whole approach. Now, I mentioned Eden, but I just, to a certain extent, I mean, I could talk at the level of a £15,000 grant if you wanted to, but I don't think that really is the answer. The answer is actually have a strategy. Now, let me share something to you. I'm in opposition. My ability to actually have power is actually quite weak, right? I can influence. So please don't walk away with the impression that I should be blamed for any of the current situation that Eastbourne is in. Because the ability of me to actually get things moving is very difficult. But I've cited areas where, independently of that, we've had some initiative. We haven't had much initiative. I agree with thoughts in terms of decentralisation, in terms of a wider set of people, in terms of the council not running as many things as it has run, etc. But the first starting point is a strategy.
Thank you.
Thank you. I actually agree with both the colleague on my left and my right. We don't have a strategy, but the other problem is that we have too much bureaucracy. Too much bureaucracy in the hands of local government employees as well as councillors. And there is no democracy left in the council. That is something that urgently needs to be addressed. One of the things I would also do, and I mentioned earlier, having our tourist information centre tucked away up here where nobody walks is crazy. That's got to be central. We've got to welcome all the visitors, and if the Green Party want all their visitors to come by train and bus, they're going to be in the centre of the town, and all they see is a building that's closed.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And finally, Paul.
I think there is a need for a vision for Eastbourne. There's lots of literature around what happens when towns and cities lose their economic purpose, and how civic leadership can then rescue those towns and cities and give them new purpose. And we have to recognise our town was built on Victorians coming on family holidays. That model isn't going to sustain us. So we need to reimagine why people want to come here. And part of it is about the experience. You get off at the station, it's not a promising start, is it? Let's face it. If you like charity shops and coffee, you're in business. But if you want anything else, it's difficult. You walk down the main drag, and again, it's a bit of a zombie apocalypse, isn't it? With all the clothes stores, and the department stores have departed. So where's the imagination for those buildings, and how you reclaim the nighttime economy? You know, I don't feel particularly safe walking around the town after dark. Exotic cigarettes wafting on the breeze, kids hanging around. It's not a nice environment for families. So where's the vision for that whole town approach? I love the fact that the arts is booming in Eastbourne, but we need to know what's the plan for after the Turner Prize. What's the legacy of that? How do we monetize that and get more out of that? How do we think about literacy festivals, having people here all year round? The conference trade, why is that so slow in Eastbourne? It is a lack of leadership. So you do need, I think, a whole town approach to attract people into the town, and once they're here, to go home and tell people about the amazing experience they had in Eastbourne. That's how you get tourism, by giving people a world-class experience.
Thank you very much. So, Brid, would you like to comment further?
I just want to say thanks for everybody's comments. One thing I would like to add to it is, we're somebody that works on the ground with tourists every day of the week, and we meet the people from all over the countries that come into Eastbourne, and we want to be proud of this town. And unfortunately, it's very hard to be proud of a seafront that is covered in hotels that are extremely dilapidated. We are the people meeting these people and trying to cover and trying to, not be embarrassed. We want them to have the best time. We're doing our part, but we need help. And we need people to actually look. First impressions are everything. You go to Rye, it's beautiful. You come back, you talk about it. You go to Eastbourne, you may never come back.
Yeah. Thank you. Does anybody want to comment? Put your hand up if you do want to comment on that. Thank you. Would you like to stand up, please?
Yes. Hi, Sally Burton. I moved down here a couple of years ago. And I think actually that the whole dynamic of these
put it up.
I'm not used to this. The whole dynamic of Eastbourne has changed as a result of COVID. A lot of people have moved to the coastal towns. And I joined FOS almost when you started.
You did, on the seafront.
Because I walk along the front as well, frequently, and I have to say that I'm very disappointed in the hotels, because you've got a beautiful hotel building opposite the pub, Hope and Crown and Anchor, I think it's called, which is just falling to bits. And all the way along there, up to the Langney, with a couple of exceptions, all you've got are immigrants standing outside, smoking marijuana, giving a very poor effect on, on tourism. Yeah. Well, I'm not going into that debate tonight. And I think a lot of clean-up could be done. Somebody started a Greek food thing on the pier. It's now for sale. Yes, you're right, we do need individual little businesses, but let's have the ones that work and that people will come back to.
Thank you very much. Just to say that the people in the hotels probably don't want to be in the hotels, and they're asylum seekers. They're not illegal immigrants, they're asylum seekers. Just to point that out. So the next question is from Russell Owen. Russell.
Good evening. My question is, what plans will each party have to restore the heritage assets along the seafront and generate income from them?
Thank you, Russell. So Susan, you're first.
What plans for the heritage? Well, one of the things I've discovered, I've been working for some time, I'm not, sort of independently, looking at things like what monies you can lever in on the sea defences, particularly around cycling I've been working. But there are other kind of things that pots of money around that are available from national government for doing this sort of work that nobody seems aware of. And I would just draw the parallel. I mean, heritage is not my speciality. But the reality is that, for example, National Highways has put some money for active travel that I understand from Cycling UK can be mobilised. Now, it seems to me that there would be quite a lot of heritage money around that could be put into those buildings should someone actually apply themselves to actually thinking about them. And actually, I think it's about novel new uses. You know, lots of the things in Eastbourne ought to be reimagined for the 2023, not just reinvented for when they were made in the Victorian age. They have to be thought about in terms of inspiring and being interesting for a modern day population. And the Turner Prize and doing things like that is one thing. So I suppose for those heritage buildings, there ought to be loads of things going on where they could be repurposed in a sensitive way, using money that is not necessary from the council, from various parts that exist around the place, and I'm sure they're there. So,
Thank you. Thank you very much. Ian.
Difficult question to answer because I'm not an expert on heritage, but what I do see all along the seafront is that we don't seem to know what we're trying to achieve there. And one of the things that I found vaguely disappointing when I walked up there last Sunday are these new information direction signs that are totally out of keeping, in my opinion, with the seafront. And you've got one of the hotels along there painted solidly black. And I think we need to look at what we're trying to achieve, what we want it to look like, and we need to actually investigate, as colleague just said, all the funding from different areas that is available and bring in all the small societies that might only have a couple of £1,000 to spend on something. But when you group them all together, it amounts to a lot of money.
Thank you. Paul.
I have to say I quite like the signs. I think they're rather effective. I had a stroll this morning and I welcomed their presence. Also, the Black Hotel Port is a success story. It's doing well, and it's doing well because it's offering something a bit different and maybe appealing to a different demographic. So let's support the successes. Russell's question was about heritage assets. I described them earlier as the jewels in the crown, but the problem is the jewels in the crown are getting a little bit tarnished, and some of them are missing. And some of the diamonds are not in the places they should be. And I saw a wonderful tourist information movie from the mid-60s, and I'm sure you've seen it. It was actually on show in the Heritage Centre. And it described Eastbourne for the then tourist trade as a series of, it was a holistic view. It's all of the different things you can do in Eastbourne, including all the different heritage sites and the assets that we've been talking about. But it was the whole package. And I think there is an absence of that understanding of how all these things interrelate. If you take out the bandstand, you take out the redoubt, then the rest of it is diminished as a result. So when I talk about vision and leadership, I'm talking about an overview of the whole town, from the station right the way through to the seafront and all points in between, including these assets, and packaging them up for the visitor as a sort of a day or two you can visit all of them, not have to sort of close your eyes as you walk past the redoubt. Also, finally, I don't support this idea that ministers get to dole out these penny buckets of money either. I think there should either be funding for heritage or not, but this idea you have to bid and compete, and we're in competition with Hastings or anybody else, and if the bid gets turned down, there's no money, it's just not a sustainable way to run a government. And I think it's, if you look at the coincidence between where the money goes and marginal seats, whether a Conservative MP is trying to get re-elected, I'm afraid the Select Committee has already shown there is that whiff of corruption around it. So I think you give proper funding to our heritage, you have a local leadership and a vision that unites it, and you give, again, the offer to the visitor that comes and shows that we've got all these wonderful things. Let's show them off in their entirety.
Thank you. Robert.
Well, thank you for your question, Russell. It was about heritage assets and generating income. 3 years ago, I supported the council's modest proposals to actually spend money on the bandstand, £3 million, spend money on the seafront lighting, I forget the number, and to spend money on the winter garden. None of that has effectively been acted upon. In terms of the bandstand, clearly that was put forward with the redoubt in terms of the new cultural bid that was added to the Levelling Up Fund 2 approach. There were 2 bids in the country, so it's always going to be difficult to get. But let me just say that in that, they were then gold-plated by the officers, so instead of a 3 million position at the bandstand, you move to something like 12 million, and something in terms of the redoubt, you go to quite a large figure. I don't actually know where the figures are, and forgive me for bleating on about this, but even, we talked about democracy, even in the privileged position that I am, I do not necessarily get all of those answers, which proves your point. Now, effectively, when that LUF 2 bid was put together, most of the input was actually from foes. I mean, where on earth were the council and the administration? The 2 of the leading officers were actually on holiday during it. There was a recently appointed cabinet member for heritage, right, who provided no input into it whatsoever. So I'm sorry to bleat on about the past, but you have to talk about the past before you get to the future. You want to ask me what I would do, right? Clearly, from the statements I've made, effectively, I would, first of all, want to investigate what we're going to do with the redoubt and get it going again, which FOES is doing on a shoestring. There is £1 million in this budget for effectively the colonnades and other bits and pieces, but effectively, the redoubt could have been open last year. I'm not quite sure where the number is that is required to open it. In terms of the bandstand, what I will commit to, and here I'll be going into party whatever, I will commit to the proposal that the Save the Bandstand group put forward as a petition at full council, which was proposed by David Tutt and Stephen Holt and agreed to unanimously, but it is not in the capital programme. The capital programme from this administration, wait for it, in terms of the bandstand, from next year forward is £125,000. That is pathetic, right? I hope that indicates to you the sort of climate that we are in, and you can't divorce the future from the past.
Thank you, Robert. Stephen.
So thank you, Russell. The question was, what are the plans that we have in terms of heritage and how to generate income? Again, my view is that there needs to be, especially there is a strategy. I've heard rumours that there haven't been tonight. There is a strategy in place, and what we did when we took over control all those years ago is that we put in place a rolling strategy on some of the key assets which had been allowed to be in a poor state. And the top 2, I could tell you now, the Wish Tower restaurant, where the roof fell off, and the Congress Theatre, where the masonry was falling down. We spent money bringing back a fantastic restaurant now with Bistro Pierre, and we spent money improving this facility that you're all currently sat in at the moment and that you see. And we have the Congress, we have the Welcome Building, that's bringing in conference trade, that's bringing in high-level quality shows for theatres. When it comes to heritage, it has to be based on a business plan. It has to be based on something that's rational and something that is absolutely longevity, so that we get value for money for everybody. And so that's why I'm very happy that the bandstand is reopening imminently, and we'll continue to invest in repairs and works that are needed for the bandstand. We'll continue to invest in other heritage assets like the redoubt, where we're spending £1 million to get it, the colonnades removed. That will then allow access, because let's remember that the redoubt was designed to keep people away, not to let people in. So there's no disabled access, there's very limited stuff in there. And so part of it is making sure that there's disabled access and entries for delivery vehicles, so that delivery vehicles can get into the building for its future use, as well as upgrading electrics and other aspects, so that we can then have a better based business case. But this isn't an issue that just Eastbourne has. There are councils up and down the country who are fighting to protect heritage buildings and heritage assets because they've been underfunded for years by either central government or others. And if it's others, and if you think it's the local authority, it's because government have neglected local authority in terms of financing. We've lost the equivalent of £13 million from our budget. Our net budget is around 16 million. And so we've got to be really, really careful when we invest and when we choose to invest in those assets. Not because I don't want the Redoubt open, I would love the Redoubt open, I'd love all of our heritage buildings open, but they've got to be a cast iron business case to ensure its longevity so it doesn't become prone to the winds of economics or whatever. It needs to be longer, and actually it needs to be part of our overall strategy that I've already spoken about, which is, okay, if we have it out, how do we make sure that its seasonality, it doesn't fluctuate up and down? How do we make sure that it's a strong, sustainable economic business model going forwards to the future? Because without that, as I say, you're just throwing good money over bad.
Thank you. If you look at the proposal that Friends of Eastbourne Seafront have put in for the bandstand, you'll see all those ideas. And so, Redoubt, sorry, beg your pardon.
And the levelling up case was incredibly strong, but it's £32 million, I think it was, or then it's sold.
Well, our proposal doesn't say that, so if you haven't seen it, we'll send it to you. We have looked very hard for a seafront strategic plan, and the last one we found was a draft in 2005. So please send it to me.
It may need updating, but yeah, we'll send it to you.
Thank you. So,
if the councillor can't get the answers, there's no chance for us to get the answers.
So, Keith.
I'd like to clarify the question. The question is, what policy is there for the heritage asset sites in Eastbourne? I take it you mean the Wish Tower, the Redoubt Fortress, the bandstand. Is that correct? All of them. All of them. Well, I hate to disappoint you, but I don't believe we should have a centralised policy. I think we should put in local management teams, people who are interested in that particular asset, and largely leave it to them. The Wish Tower, sorry, not the Wish Tower, the bandstand was very, very good at showing tribute bands. The Redoubt used to have a very popular war games event where people from all around the country would go and play war games, and they also used to have a Tchaikovsky recital. The only thing that I could really think of is that if there is external funding, such as government funding and other kinds of charitable funding, then there could be a small team centrally at Eastbourne Borough Council to facilitate the individual management groups to gain access to that funding. But no, I don't believe in central. Oh, sorry. No, I do not believe in a central policy for the assets.
So a central policy as such, but for each heritage asset to be looked at. So not discounting any of them, whether they're run by different bodies or whether they're run by one body, but they all need to be taken on board for their own value.
I don't believe they should be run by council bodies. For instance, the Wish Tower, there must be people who really like the Wish Tower, and they will take control of that and do the best for it.
That's fine. Provided they're all in good hands, that's fine.
Yeah.
But they're not.
But not necessarily under council hands.
No.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't have the mic. I'm new to this, so I apologise.
Did you want to say any more, Russell?
Well, the only thing really is that the strategy needs to be more transparent. There's never been transparency in heritage. Arts and heritage were side by side when the museum was up at Gilbridge Park, and since it's moved down to the new Towner, heritage seems to have been set aside. So with the heritage, basically it's to renovate and rejuvenate. It all needs looking at, whether that be along the seafront throughout the rest of the town as well. And it's been mentioned already, and I won't go on about it, but you say there's a 16 million shortfall. It's already been alluded to that that's been swallowed up in the underestimate of one project. So perhaps also the accounts need looking at better for the town for that 16 million, and it should be shared out further.
Thank you, Russell. Does anybody want to make a comment? Start with Amanda.
Oh, thanks, Kerry. I just wanted to make a comment when we're talking about the heritage buildings and attracting visitors to Eastbourne about the toilets. Most of the complaints I get as a councillor are about the state of the toilets. Not that they're not cleaned, because they are cleaned, but that they are old-fashioned, unfit for purpose, and they're a disgrace to the seafront. And if we want to get people into these lovely assets that we're improving, if we want to get them into the kiosks, we've got to give them comfort places which are clean and respectable. And I think if you've got a strategy, this has got to be included in it. And nobody ever talks about it. But in my postbag as a councillor, that's what I hear about from both residents and visitors. So please, can we have a Friends of Eastbourne Seafront toilet?
Thank you. Who else? The gentleman at the back, Kerry.
Thank you. Where I'm coming from is finance. It is my pet hobby, and this all requires money. I have one question for Stephen Holt. He knows what it is. It's all about Leicester and £3.5 million. Why did we support Leicester? Can we get our money back, and can we feed this into the town?
Stephen, would you like to respond?
I mean, this is about Seafront. I'm happy to take the response afterwards, but the way I know you said there's a load of questions that are coming as well. I'm also happy to take every single question that isn't covered tonight, as well as a follow-up. Email them over, and I'll give a response to all of them, regardless of whether or not we cover them tonight, including the ICE question. The ICE question is a guarantee for a loan.
Could you use the microphone?
Yeah.
The ICE question is a guarantee that we made. We're getting an income as a result of it, and we're very happy with it at this moment in time. It's incredibly complicated, far too complicated for hustings on a one-to-one question, but I'm very happy to follow up with you after the end of the meeting.
Thank you. So any other questions on heritage particularly? Bob?
Right, a quick question to each of the candidates really. A bit disappointed to hear that there's only £125,000 for the full refurbishment of the bandstand, or what's left to do on the bandstand. From each of the candidates, how many years before you could say the bandstand would be fully open, with the walkways open and the undercover sections open? Just how many years before you'd like that to happen from each of the candidates?
Well, can we just have a very quick number answer from you all?
I don't know why there's a delay. The bandstand makes money.
The microphone, please. Yeah.
I don't know why there's a delay. The bandstand makes money. They should have fixed it by now.
Thank you.
I agree 100%. I walked up there on Sunday, and so much of it is still boarded up, and I was led to believe it was supposed to be opening on Sunday.
Thank you.
Crazy.
Bob, I think the answer to your question is actually 1 year. Effectively, I mean, you're quite, because I'm relying on the fact that your question talked about the walkways.
Yes.
The walkways are not really the problem. As you probably recognise, what's been done this year is very, very limited. It's actually the bandstand itself. The budget was 750,000. They've gone over the budget as usual, but that is a simple piece. In terms of what actually opens this year, much of it will be open, and much of the walkways will be open. Because of the intervention of foes to a certain extent, and their thinking, the council are now thinking actually of using the covered piece under the top level for food and beverage type operations, and that sort of thinking. The main expenditure, potential expenditure on the bandstand, is in terms of the colonnades and the steel and the concrete situation. And I hate to say it, I've got to say it again, I've not really had, to my satisfaction, a proper explanation of how we've gone from what the difference is between 750,000, the 3 million that we were going to spend 3 years ago, and the 12 million that was in the LUF 2 position. Somewhere was a number that we would commit to. But I certainly, from my perspective, we will commit to honouring the petition put out by the Save the Bandstand group.
Thank you.
Well, I think all I've heard is really points to the need for some kind of strategy and see the bandstand in the context of what actually happens to the whole seafront. And the lack of that strategy and the piecemeal approach probably means that the cost of actually putting the thing right is far more than it would be if you actually approach the problem as a whole rather than just responding in an ad hoc manner to the demands of the various bits of the seafront that's falling apart.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stephen?
Well, the good news is the bandstand reopens on Sunday. I'm happy to commit to what we committed to at the motion, which is we'll continue to put applications forwards and prioritise those applications for that bandstand and the heritage grant going forward. So that would be my answer.
Thank you.
I think it's vital to remember that it's not government money we're talking about, it's our money we're talking about. We pay the taxes that goes into those funds, and what is absent and why there are these delays and why these assets are boarded up is the absence of political will. And my time in government has taught me that with political will you can move mountains, you can do all kinds of things quickly if there is that drive behind it, and that's what seems to be absent, which is why I'm talking about new leadership, because there's no reason why that bandstand was closed for so long and why the delays are in place now. It's the absence of will that means that has happened, and the rest of us are poorer as a result.
Thank you very much. We're just going to move on to the next question, otherwise we won't get through them all. We're going to ask Scarlett McNally now to ask her question.
Hello, thank you. Scarlett McNally. My question is, high levels of congestion have reduced safe routes for cycling. To encourage active travel, will you support a two-way cycle route along the seafront in place of parking where the promenade is narrow? Thank you.
Thank you. Keith?
Can I have the microphone? Yes.
Robert?
Probably not. There's a balance there in terms of that. I do think that I've said that we need an overall transport strategy, including the piece you specifically talk about. I have some sympathy with the point you're making. We have actually talked about a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, which would certainly help.
Thank you. Paul?
The Labour Party, you'll be pleased to know, is not advocating closing the roads. The roads will remain open under a Labour administration, but there does need to be a shift to different types of transport, and I would see an integrated approach. I don't think everyone can cycle. Some people cannot cycle. Many people should be cycling who aren't, but you can't have a strategy just around people getting on their bike, because that is not realistic. However, I think there must be better options for walking. I'm a fan of public transport, as I've indicated earlier, and as cars move into being electric vehicles increasingly, I think you do need car access too. So it's about a balance, it's about being fair to all, and it's about recognising that not everyone will go for a single mode of transport.
Thank you. Susan?
The reality is, unless you create designated cycle lanes, when you create them, people come and use them. And it's not just cycles, it's all types of wheeled vehicles that are not cars, essentially. Those for the disabled, scooters, the rest of it. So you cannot really deal with the problem of transferring or giving people a choice in how they travel unless you create an infrastructure for them to travel on. You have a massive infrastructure for cars, which takes up enormous land, enormous space, makes very little money for the council in terms of car parks being half empty. And as I said before, all places that have gone down this route, they've had massive opposition to the point that the people who propose these things have often had their lives threatened. But at the end of the day, when it has happened, nobody wants to go back to a place which is so congested with cars that it's unpleasant for everyone, and that you can't cycle, walk pleasantly around the place. It actually encourages footfall, creates a tremendous environment, enables people to travel with ease, short distances. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Stephen?
I absolutely want seafront cycling. I think it's bizarre that we're one of the only seaside towns across the country not to have full seafront cycling. I think it links, as I said earlier on, with regards to harbour to downs, and I think it's a massive potential that we're not harnessing as part of our tourism sector and economy when we're talking about active travel, active trips, active holidays for national parks. According to Sustrans, 1.23 million overnight stays a year through cycling, contributing to around £443 million. I absolutely want seafront cycling. I think it's bizarre we don't have it. I can't commit to sort of the two-way to take away for car parking spaces. I think there's other strategies, I think there's other ways of doing it, particularly and potentially with the seafront defences that are coming up. There might be something we can utilise with that, maybe a flyway, or maybe, dare I say, it's some form of segregation in terms of the promenade itself. We've got 3 promenades in some of the areas, surely one of them could potentially be used for shared cycling or whatever. So I absolutely want seafront cycling. I want it to happen.
Thank you. Ian?
Yes, it is an issue that we do need to address, and I was asked this question actually last week by a group of cyclists, and having put some thought to it, maybe to enable a cycle lane, we could have traffic going on the seafront road going west one way, and the traffic going east using seaside. And I haven't had a chance to explore that, but it's maybe one area that we could look at, so we could facilitate a cycle lane, but maintain car parking, maintain vehicular access.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your comments. Scarlett, do you want to come back?
Yes, I just want to make a couple of points. It's not about the people cycling now, it's about people who could potentially cycle, and there's many towns and places in Europe where more people take up cycling. Electric cycles are fantastic, and I invite any of the councillors to come and borrow. I've got 3 when I fold up to go to London to borrow one. We can go out on a trip and show you. It's amazing, honestly. Eastbourne's only 4 miles across. That it's easily cyclable, particularly with an electric bike. Heels are no problem. Please do it. So it's for everybody, and it reduces congestion for everyone else, parking stress, the traffic jams, and the ill health people get from physical inactivity. We're as a nation, we just aren't getting enough exercise, so it's for everyone and the tourists. It's a win-win-win-win-win, and pollution, everything. So please just think about it. It's for people. It's not just for me. I cycle. It's for everybody. Thank you very much.
Gentleman at the back.
Good evening. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity of expressing our feelings. Now, I speak not from the point of view of a present-day cyclist, but I have done my fair amount of cycling to and from work, down to the south of France and back for a couple of 2-week holidays. I've been on a bicycle all the way around England, down as far as Turkey. I came back by boat, working my way, so it was a very interesting way. But I've had a fair amount of experience with different countries as well. It took me a great deal of time to get used to cycling on the left-hand side of the right-hand side of the road instead of the left-hand side after the continent. But the point being that I have noticed a lot of cyclists along the seafront in various places, but a lot of cyclists, younger and older, have not been trained properly, or haven't trained themselves properly, to use pedestrian and cycle areas. They have the attitude of the driver on the road when he sees a cyclist. I've got 4 wheels, he's only got 2, I have right of way, and it's the other way round in as far as traffic order is concerned. So there has to be a lot of training, education of potential cyclists in order to use whatever is given them or whatever is already there to use it properly. And apart from establishing new routes for cyclists, get your cyclists who are there at the moment to use it properly, to use it thoughtfully for the pedestrians that are going along there, and also the people in their little 5 mile an hour little chuggy pedestrian scooters, for example, let alone the higher speeds of quite a number of people who use electric bicycles on the road without traffic light, without front and rear lights, without any sort of registration or anything like this. They use the road having a proper idea of traffic use.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your question.
One other point.
Very quick, very quick.
Very quick. 20 mile an hour in London. Okay, London's different, but in London, in the congestion areas, 20 miles an hour traffic has been found to produce a lot more pollution than 30 mile an hour traffic.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next question now from Chris Murphy.
Good evening. My question is, what would they do to compensate for the lack of tourist revenue into the town due to usage of several seafront hotels for asylum seekers, which has resulted in nil revenue but added a burden on the local community?
Did you all hear that question?
No.
Could you say it again, but put it close to your mouth?
What would they do to compensate for the lack of tourist revenue into the town due to the usage of several seafront hotels for asylum seekers, which has resulted in nil revenue but added an extra burden onto the local community?
Paul.
The presence of a few traumatised, scared, overwhelmingly quite people with gumption who have managed to get here is not what is stopping a booming tourist industry in Eastbourne. It is not something that is going to stop people visiting if we have a strategy in place. The asylum system is broken, but politicising it and blaming people, I'm not saying you are, I'm saying that is the narrative out there, is not going to help anybody at all. And if you want to stop the boats, the way you stop the boats is by smashing the gangs that are putting people on the boats, not blaming the poor souls, many of whom are highly educated and extremely motivated people who get here in the first place. So, let's mend the asylum system and do it that way, but let's not get into the terrible business of scapegoating.
Thank you. Ian.
It's a huge subject, and I would agree that we do need to smash the gangs that take huge amounts of money to bring these people. The question I have, we don't actually know who these people are that we're putting up in the hotels. Some are probably genuinely frightened asylum seekers. Some we know because MI5 are actually tracking now in excess of 500 who are known terrorists in the country they came from.
Look, can I just butt in just for a second? The question is about compensation for the lack of tourist revenue into the town due to the hotel being used for this purpose. So it's not about whoever is living at the moment in the hotels, because those big hotels, at least 6, probably 7 or 8 in Eastbourne, are being used for asylum seekers. They're not being used for holiday makers, and when they're not used for holiday makers, nobody is spending in the restaurants, the pubs, the shops, the cafes.
Correct.
That's the point. So
yes.
I don't want to talk about asylum seekers as such.
The point I was going today. Seafront hotels or hotels in any town are not the place for those people. We have to stop the draw, and therefore we won't need to put them up in those hotels, because it is destroying the economy of not just seafronts, it's destroying many towns' economy where the hotels are being used for this purpose. And we have to stop it.
Thank you. Robert.
Thank you. Well, I won't indulge myself by getting into the national political issue. In terms of the question, in terms of the seafront hotels, I think we've all been, whilst it is undesirable to have them here, I believe, and I believe the question is phrased that it's undesirable to have them here, we have at least 6 hotels that have been occupied by them. In terms of the economics, it has been far too attractive for the hoteliers to take £2,000 a month from an asylum seeker or illegal immigrant, whichever you wish to call them, to refuse that sort of business. I think we've actually relatively, and I hope this isn't going to go out of this room particularly, but I think we've all tried
to... It will, Robert. We're being filmed.
You're on camera.
you might have to edit this bit, Chris.
No editing.
Okay, no editing.
So if you don't want it said, don't say it.
Be on record.
All right. The fact of the matter is that there has not been a huge amount of negative publicity in terms of what's going on, and the people who are handling it, I think, actually on a cross-party basis, we've actually all striven to actually try to minimise the issues relating to it. In terms of what we can actually do about it, all we can do is seek to hope that these hotels will be moved relatively soon. And the conversations that we have with officers suggest that there should be some movement in the next few months. Thank you.
It's an extremely difficult question. Hotels are an inappropriate place to house asylum seekers. Presumably the hotel owners are making quite a lot of money out of it. But this so-called asylum seeking is a business. It's a black market business. And it's incredibly difficult to know how to deal with it. I don't think I have an answer. Because amongst people who should not be seeking asylum, there are people who should be. And how do you tell the difference between them?
Remember, this question is not about the actual asylum seekers.
It's
about how would you, if you were elected, compensate the lack of the loss of tourist revenue?
I can't think of a one. I think it's victims all the way down.
Okay, thank you very much. Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. It's an important question. It's a good one, and it's a challenging one. I find it interesting that the one time Councillor Smart has spoken, well, the one national question we've had so far, Councillor Smart said it's not really our problem, and yet we've got a Conservative MP. So just bear that in mind, everybody. It's the Conservative government and the Home Office that are placing these people in our seafront hotels. And it's our officers, it's us who are trying to make it better for them. They are fleeing persecution, they're fleeing difficulties. But you're right, we're not here to talk about the policy itself. So what would I do? I would ask, encourage, push and pursue the Home Office to make a decision on those cases so that we can start to close those seafront hotels and have them adequately looked after, cared for, supported, or relocated whatever the outcome of their cases are. But let's be honest here, this is the Home Office who have made this decision. It is a national government issue that they have done, and we need to really press hard to just get this sorted, because it's just not right for our communities, and it's also not right for those poor people who are in those hotels.
Thank you. Susan?
Well, 11 o'clock tomorrow morning I will be going to one of those hotels, as I do every Thursday morning, to teach English to those asylum seekers. And they haunt me. I got people who say they've been train drivers, they're fit young men who are just bored, really. And I don't know the answer. I know this is not about this, but I don't know the answer. But I'll move on to the economics of it. But it's clear those hotels are deteriorating in the fabric of them. And it seems to me that what one should try and do, because they won't be staying there forever, that's true, either they will be moved on or whatever, is look at some kind of refurbishment, asking the government some money to do that, because they really could deteriorate. It does raise a very interesting question about, as you say, they're getting £2,000 a month for those asylum seekers, another £2,000 a month each. But the possibilities of actually thinking about how to get some money back from Eastbourne, for Eastbourne, on that, and the general ring fencing of monies that are coming in from various places. Could they go to local businesses, local industries, so that some of the money is actually spent in Eastbourne and isn't sucked out of it and going to somewhere else? And that needs really thinking through to see whether the local economy can actually be recompensed in some way for having the deterioration of its fabric. But it is a very, very difficult situation, which there's quite a few people that are like me. I think there's now about 20 of us that are actually going every week to hotels to teach them English. And we have thought about other things to do with them, like trying to get them volunteering to clean the beach. But that is going to be quite a difficult thing to set up, because their level of English is quite poor. So after the elections, I promised some of my friends who also do this that we would think about trying to get them to do some volunteer work, because they're actually very fit young men who are just bored. Yeah. And we may be able to mobilise them in some way or the other.
Thank you very much. Okay. Well, I think basically the answer is no compensation. It's very difficult, isn't it? But it's a very unfair situation when you've got so many hotels that are, are making such a lot of money and putting absolutely nothing at all back into the town. It's very poor. Yeah. There's a lady just at the back that would like to ask a question, and we'll take one from Catherine, and then we'll move on to the next question. Can't hear you.
It's not really a question, but one to do money.
We can't hear you, I'm afraid. You have to hold it up.
Using the asylum seekers, ask them to use their skills around the town to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think that was touched on by Susan. Yeah, volunteering, good idea. So we'll just take one question from Catherine, and then we'll move on. Keep up, Kerry, keep up.
It's just a comment, really. I think the hotels that are making so much money out of this very sad and unfortunate business should be forced to pay a certain amount of money, number one, for their upkeep, and number two, towards the town that it's losing out so much. And I can't see why they should be allowed to just cream off all this money from this terrible situation and get away with it. When the rest of us are forced to walk down a seafront, when these hotels are looking a mess, they're a disaster. I have nothing against the poor unfortunate people who are forced to stay there, but I have everything against the hotels who are allowing themselves to become run down so that our guests coming in from abroad take a very, very poor opinion away from our lovely town.
Thank you. Just a minute, we're just moving on now. Thank you. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next question from Bet Murphy. Hold it right to your mouth.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
This antisocial behaviour, graffiti and litter...
No, put it near your mouth.
The antisocial behaviour, graffiti and litter in many parts of the town, principally the main thoroughfare from Eastbourne Station down Terminus Road to the seafront. The current council has certainly not improved things over the years, and I would say it has actually got worse. What would you propose to improve the state of affairs? Thank you.
Thank you. Ian.
I agree. It starts actually with education at school, where there's no discipline, etc. But I think one of the things that we need to do in Seafront and up those areas you just mentioned, we need some street wardens. We need street wardens who, when they see people littering, they see people graffitiing, they can be challenged. Rother District Council has started doing this. It needs a bit of tweaking, but it is certainly working. And therefore we need to do it in Eastbourne.
Thank you. Susan.
Well, I got mixed feelings about graffiti. I mean, I noticed that the places with lots of graffiti are actually very up-and-coming places. I mean, look at Hastings, it's alive, it's a well, it's got graffiti. If you go to Hackney in London, if you go to Stoke Newington in London, many young people, you know, it's the edge of the arts scene in London, full of graffiti.
We're not talking Banksy here.
No, I know, but the graffiti in Hackney is not Banksy either. It's just graffiti. And places with a bit of edge and a bit of liveliness are actually the places that actually have the energy to provide new industry and new things. Graffiti, I mean, there are many ways of controlling graffiti. In London they have little graffiti projects in school, you know, you give children or teenage boys walls to actually and paint, and on you go. As regards the litter, now, I, like many other people, when we walk down Terminus Road, feel a sense of our heart dropping. It's a miserable place. And unless it's I was going to say beautified in some way, but that's the wrong thing. Unless it's made to look as though it's a loved and cared for environment, then the litter will increase. I think it has to have a sense of interest and life, and not look like a complete urban desert like it looks like now, because nobody will care for it if it looks like that.
Thank you. It seems to me that there must be education about not dropping your litter, but where are the street cleaners? Where have they gone? You go down at 9 o'clock in the morning and the place is just full of rubbish. It just hasn't been cleaned. So I'm just wondering what's happened to our street cleaners. Paul, you're next.
You'll remember maybe 90 minutes ago I launched Labour's 5-point plan for tourism, and point number 3, as you'll recall, was to tackle antisocial behaviour. And I think I'm right in saying I was the only candidate to mention antisocial behaviour in the opening statements. It is important. I'm a great advocate of what's called broken windows theory, which is that if people see things like graffiti, it's not art by the way, it's people scribbling on the walls. If they see litter, if they see broken windows, they feel that the space is ungoverned, that it's not safe, so they stay away. So the people then fill the void of the people who shouldn't be there, and you get a sort of downward spiral of decline. If you clean up the streets, if you get the graffiti off the walls, if you prosecute people who are behaving in antisocial ways, if you report through street wardens, good idea by the way, things like, you know, broken vandalism, whatever, then you reclaim those streets. People come back, and you know from New York, when they cleaned the graffiti off the underground there, the murder rate dropped. That was a causal thing, because normal people stayed out late, they came into the town, they reclaimed New York. So we can do the same, and it is that thin end of the wedge. ASB, antisocial behaviour, is not something that we should tolerate. It is something we need to stamp on, because it does add then to the whole ambience, the whole atmosphere. And you know, if you want a thriving tourist industry, which is what we're talking about, if we want people to come into the town, families to come in to visit, then the first thing they should see is, you know, people going about their business safely, uniformed presence on the street, more police, as I mentioned too, as well as the PCSOs and street wardens, and an absence of litter and graffiti. And that's a virtuous circle then, where people will come and they'll come back.
Thank you. Robert.
Thank you, Beth, for the question. I mean, in terms of all of these areas, antisocial behaviour, graffiti and littering, there's no doubt that the council has to up its game by a long way. In terms of antisocial, sometimes they're slightly different. In terms of antisocial behaviour, clearly we've had some success in getting some PSPOs, the public space protection orders in there. There is more room for much more enforcement, and there isn't adequate enforcement of some of the prevailing rulings. Clearly we move into a situation which the council itself doesn't have responsibility for, which is the police. I think, you know, there may be, I don't want to get outside the council position, but I mean, there are quite a number of PCSOs in Eastbourne now, and I think that they should be used. I hope that you as members of the public are all reporting incidents and making sure that the report is there. In terms of graffiti and litter, I think there is an indication that frankly the staffing has got far too weak, and I've been pressing personally for some standards and key performance indicators on street cleaning. We have key performance indicators on waste collection. And waste collection and street cleaning is within the same company, and you know we have a song and dance in terms of waste collection. Actually, often there's quite a lot of very good performance. Not good on recycling. Recycling ain't that great. But in street cleaning, there are no KPIs. There's no reporting of what is happening on street cleaning, and that is what I've been pressing for. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen.
So we actually have a very good street cleaning team who go out regularly, and you might not see them at 9 o'clock, but that's often because they're out there at 6 o'clock in the morning starting, and they continually clean empty bins and remove waste. And I know that because I've joined them, and actually one of the things I've also done as part of the work that we've been doing is organise a multi-agency group, because these, I mean, it's been alluded to, antisocial behaviour, graffiti, litter, it's not solved by one individual, it's not solved by one agency. In terms of graffiti, the challenge we often have is that we can remove stuff on our own buildings, but you can't start removing graffiti off other people's buildings because you'll cause damage by removing the paint. And we have had issues with that, and other councils have. So we set up a team involving the police and the street cleansing team and the business crime specialist to look at the hotspots, look at the areas, and to start tackling those hotspots, crop areas, bits and pieces. One of the other challenges we have is that we're still waiting for that next stage of redevelopment from the County Council, from Bankers Corner to Blacks and then further up, which is again causing that street scene. But I do believe that what this is about is partnership working together to solve the situation, and actually, frankly, sometimes rolling up your sleeves and doing it as well.
Thank you. And finally, Keith.
Well, the problem with the question is that there's many issues all rolled up into the same thing, and they have different causes. The thing about graffiti and antisocial behaviour, well, for a start, I think they're more of a police issue than a council issue. And the police are far too interested in politics and not interested enough in solving crime, in my opinion. but I'll put it bluntly. The antisocial behaviour, well, it's such a wide question, I can only focus in one small part of that. I used to run a fruit barrel along the seafront and through town. And I used to speak to drug addicts, lots and lots of drug addicts. Some of them are really nice guys, some of them are not. Some of them are spiteful and vicious people, but many of them are really nice guys. But they live in a separate society to the rest of us. They steal to fund their drugs, and the police can't be bothered to arrest them. They arrest them an hour later. They turn up an hour later after the incident. I used to be in Marks and Spencer's and watch people come in, fill up a carrier bag full of steaks and run out. And the police wouldn't turn up for half an hour later. Those steaks would then be sold for drugs. And we're back into the same sort of issues that the people trade is evil. The drugs trade is also evil. I'm not entirely sure the best way to deal with it is as a crime. My guess is the best way to treat it is as a medical issue. And this is going to sound awful, but if people are on heroin, the best way to break the heroin trade is to give them heroin, to cut out the dealers. I hate to say this, but I think the drugs war has been fought and lost.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much. So we're going to go on to, we're starting to run out of time. We're at 9:15. Did you want to make a comment? Yeah, right at the back. We'll just take one question.
I just wondered where all the kids that do the graffiti, if we had a place for them to go, like in Gildridge Park, there's a skate park there. Yeah. Why can't they go there and have somewhere legal and they won't tag on shop windows, break windows, and do all the things that we don't like if they had somewhere to go? Where do they go? To the beach?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask if Fiona would like to ask this question about Fisherman's Green. Is it? Who's asking it? Ah.
I'm too far away.
Which question are you answering?
6.
Yeah, I just jumped over that one because we're running out of a bit of time. So is Fiona, are you here? You are here, aren't you? Did you want to ask a question about Fisherman's Green?
Okay, can you hear me? Oh, yes, hello. I'll break into song next, so beware. Okay, the question is...
Could you stand up?
I can't because of my legs.
Oh, fair enough.
My sticks are underneath me. I will get on with the question. How would you propose to improve and develop Fisherman's Green, yet maintain its heritage?
Oh. Forgotten my own system there. So that's to Paul. Did you all hear the question?
I did not hear it loud and clear, thank you very much. I think it's a really special place, Fisherman's Green. I enjoy being there, and I think there is a kind of a uniqueness to it that I don't think should be handed over to developers, frankly. I don't think it's the right place for a big housing development. And I think I was reading in the Hansard and the parliamentary record of whether or not it had to be included in plans for extra housing, and the Secretary of State made it absolutely clear that it doesn't. So why officers advised councillors that it should be, I don't know, but I think they were wrong. I mean, a strong leadership would have said no to that proposal, because we need to preserve the great character of that area, and it's a wonderful resource for everyone. It's it's for recreation. There are independent shops. There's the fishing, obviously, as well, and the clubs. And it's just a nice place. Why mess it up?
Thank you, Keith.
Fisherman Green is doing great. It's got some good fish shops, it's got some tennis courts, it's got a canoeing centre, it's got the Fisherman's Club. It's fine. I wouldn't develop it anymore. I wouldn't allow housing there. It's working just fine. But I'd like to to add something to what I said earlier, if that's possible. We're talking about the drug problem in Eastbourne.
No, we're moving on.
No, I'd like to
No, we're moving on.
I'd like to say one thing, because that's actually the cause of this antisocial behaviour.
Yeah, we got your point, but we're moving on now. So the question is now to Stephen.
Hi, and thank you, Fiona, for the question. It's been great to meet with you, chat with you, and do various things with you, so hello again. So, because Paul mentioned it, others will no doubt mention it, it was never our intention to build, sell Fisherman's Green. Atom. The planning system is top-down, it's incredibly messy from government, and government kind of admitted this by the fact that they're talking about planning reforms. And what the Secretary of State said was that the bill they're putting through, the bill and the reforms they're putting through would mean it could be taken out, not that it is, and that's not legal yet. Now, yeah, it is. It's the bill. It's the bill. Now, if I can just continue. We were told by, so traditionally local plans, when they're being considered, consulted on, we were told no stone could be left unturned for a plan to be approved. If you look it up, and we spoke, myself at Cabinet on 2nd of November, spoke against the proposals for Fisherman's Green in terms of any level of development. Now, going back to the questions, what would I do? Like I've already said, like I'm already doing, I would talk to the residents about what they want to see next. We've got the LTA upgrading the tennis courts. We've got a fantastic new business there, which is being run by Simply Patisserie, Naz and Nunu. We want to do more with Fisherman's Green and make it more of a leisure site, because too many people think of it as a parking site. So I want to do more with it as a leisure site, but I want to work with residents on that. One of the things we're talking about doing, for example, is working with local school kids to put a Fisherman's Green sign up, so that it talks more about the leisure opportunities and the leisure activities rather than just being a car park. So for me, as I say, it was never our intention to sell or develop Fisherman's Green. It was, if you like, a bureaucratic thing.
It was a mess then, wasn't it? What a mess.
Thank you. Robert's next.
Well, thank you. This is my pet subject. The basic problem is that we're without a local plan. And we've been without a local plan since 2018, which frankly is incompetent. And we won't have a local plan for 2 years. When we had a local plan in Eastbourne, the Liberal Democrat administration keeps putting forward this number of 738 houses in Eastbourne. That is not correct. It is 738 before the constraints, which we all know all about them, are taken into account. And when that was last discussed, when the local plan was in existence in 2018, it came down to 240 units per year. And effectively, I suspect that the levelling up and regeneration bill will reduce that significantly further. Eastbourne can probably manage about 200 units per year. That is simple. So I'm sorry, the fact of the matter, Paul's already made the point, right? This was a scare story put up by the administration. In terms of what we should do with the Fisherman's Green, no to housing, no to hotels. It should be designated as a tourist and leisure area. I'm not quite sure, from the fun end of things, how much a potential Eden project might encroach on that. But as I've said, I'm quite prepared to talk a little bit more on that subject. The Eden people are incredibly consultative, and I'm sure when, as I hope, we get into a second stage discussion with Eden, they will want to talk to the Friends of Eastbourne Seafront, they will want to talk to the people on Fisherman's Green about exactly what happens. But it is a leisure and recreation site. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to take some questions from the audience, okay? I know, but I've only got a few minutes, so I'll come back to you. But I just want to take some questions. Fiona, do you want to make a comment?
No, I don't want to come back, but other than saying
Use
that,
the microphone.
so far everybody has responded very interestingly.
Okay, thank you very much.
And there was a very interesting responses from those we've heard from tonight.
I know, I'll come back. Did anybody else want to comment?
Yeah,
I thought there was... Ian, just wait for the mic.
Sorry. Don't need a mic, I'm a PE. What I was going to say to you is that Wielden had a...
Can you hear?
Wielden had
No, use the mic, please, Ian.
Wealdon had a plan, and I'm afraid within about 2 or 3 years it was overturned. We've now got a building on Hindlands, which is part of Brighton University Field, 500 houses. And Mornings Farm next to it is also, which was prime agricultural land, is being built on. So Willingdon and Polegate will become one infrastructure in the end. So a plan, you know, a building plan doesn't actually work because it gets turned over very quickly. What they do, they bring high-powered barristers down and they look at loopholes in the wall in a different situation, and they get turned over by sort of very difficult parish councillors who are fighting that sort of thing. So you've got to be very careful about planning, you know, applications and things like that.
Okay, thank you. Christina, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Gaynor. Yeah, I just wanted to
Stand
say
up.
that I am standing for the council in this area this time round because I want to fight for what's right for this whole seafront, particularly from east of Terminus Road all the way to the Sovereign Ward. And I want to fight to make sure that we don't get any building on Fisherman's Green. Every time I go there are kids playing. There are kids playing basketball, there are kids skating. The tennis courts are run down, so we need to see those refurbished, which is going to happen this year, according to the LTA. And we need to introduce other things there. There's a fantastic crab shack, and there's the brilliant Southern Head Fisheries. We need to make more of that. We need to put seats out, like Naz and Nunu have done, to encourage people to go there and to enjoy it as a leisure facility. We also need to do that with the pavilion gardens to make sure that pavilion gardens don't hide antisocial behaviour. They attract tourists and people to enjoy tapas and a glass of wine. I die for a glass of wine when I'm walking my dog on that end of the seafront. There isn't anywhere unless I go and see Derek.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So we'll just go back to our panel then. Susan.
Well, I agree with Christina, and I'd like to see it really not redeveloped for housing, but redeveloped as an attraction. You have a marine conservation zone out there, which is likely to be increase what is going on in the sea, if you like. You could have a centre that looked at what's going on underwater, centres for, someone mentioned seaweed baths as well. I also think that the car park area there is a complete waste of space. You obviously need somewhere people can go to park their cars to get the fish, but it's a real mess. You never know whether you're intruding on a commercial area or whether you can walk around freely, poke around, see what's going on. People want to say things like, well, what does a crab pot look like? What does a lobster pot look like? There needs to be things that introduces people to the fishing industry, introduces them to what's happening in the sea out there. And the buildings themselves are very run down and tatty looking. They need to be painted. They're all rusty, what have you. Then there's the lifeboat. Then there's the lifeboat that people are doing up voluntarily. You know, that much more can be made of that. There ought to be some kind of fishing heritage centre or place to learn how to cook fish. You know what I mean? Things like that.
Okay, thank you. Ian, did you want to comment?
Yes, I would just add that any development for housing, hotels or what have you would be totally inappropriate, and we do need to encourage all the small organisations who might have an interest in part of fishing, in the bowls club, in skating, in tennis, etc. And encourage all those people to make their own little bit of investment to brighten it up and tidy it up. But it must stay as an asset as it is at the moment.
Here, here. Thank you. Thank you very much. So our final question before I go off and have that glass of wine that Christina's talking about, and that's from Ian Shaw. Caught you out.
Exactly, yes. How do you propose, if elected,
to salvage this town from the dire economic situation it finds itself in?
That was you, Susan, but I won't ask you. I'll let you have your water. So, Stephen.
So, thank you for the question. As the person responsible for council's finances, it's probably appropriate that it's me, and but I'm the last one to it's the last question of the night. So, thank you for that. We've done an outstanding job over the last few years, and indeed longer, in terms of managing council finances despite the lack of support from central government. Again, we have lost revenue support grant over the years, and so our income is now down to some highly fluctuating, so council tax and business rates. Our team, our officers, ourselves, we put a strategy in place after COVID and the challenges with COVID, where we put in a recovery and stabilisation team, and we worked together, cross-party, but we worked together, and we identified £5 million worth of savings and income targets. We've beaten and we've exceeded. It's got to be careful. Our investments have got to be careful. Part of what we've done is we've worked as a business. We've worked to make sure that everything we do is a solid business case, a solid financial case, and that we invest in our town, and all of our investments are based upon supporting the town, supporting the town's economy, supporting the town's growth. So we'll continue to work together in partnership and continue to support the town and continue to stabilise and grow the council's finances.
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you for that question. Thank you for your military service as well. It's good to see veterans in the room. I began the night by saying what an amazing turnout this has been for what is a political meeting, so thanks for that. But I'll end by saying what a wondrous thing an election is, and that when you walk into that, I know I wouldn't say this as a nerd, but it is true that when you walk into that polling station and take up that stubby pencil in that booth and you cast your vote and stick it in a tin box, you have the power. You have the power to decide these things. That is the way we work, and the democracy of our country and of Eastbourne is a wondrous thing. So if you are dissatisfied with the near bankruptcy that the council has been driven to, on the 4th of May you have a chance to do something about it. I'm proud to be standing, obviously, in this election. I'm even more proud that my son is standing in this election in Sovereign. He's not yet 21. He thinks it's important that young people get involved in the election, and he's doing his bit. So if you are concerned about all the things we've talked about, from the redoubt through to Fisherman's Green, through to graffiti, through to ASB, through to the overall financial perilous state of the council, in that moment you have that power. Isn't that a wonderful, wonderful thing? A lot of people all over the world would be very jealous of what we can do on the 4th of May, so I hope you will come out, regardless of who you vote for, that you will come out and vote.
Thank you.
Well, we keep hearing from the current council about how much money they've lost, but we asked to look at the council accounts, and the last certified accounts that they are able to supply us are from 2019. Why? What is going on with the finance of our council when they cannot provide us with up-to-date accounts? And I find that appalling.
Would you like to respond to that, Stephen?
Again, this is a national issue where...
No, it's not!
Sorry, it absolutely is. If you look at Grant Thornton, what's happening is because the auditors aren't paid enough, they're not prioritising local government council accounts, and therefore they're not being certified. We're not the only one. Please do, if you're interested, do look it up. If you are concerned, absolutely look it up. Councils across the country are still waiting for their signed-off audited reports.
Okay, thank you.
And there are many who already have them.
Okay. Okay, so Keith, would you like to respond?
The way to improve the economy of Eastbourne, one way, is to stop council officials being so bossy. The job of the council is to encourage and facilitate small businesses. Do not look to the council or the government for solutions, because in many cases they are the problem. The council should be light, and their job is to enable people, not to take a direct role in the economy.
Thank you. And Robert, would you like to respond?
Well, how long have we got?
A couple of minutes.
The quick answer to your question is root and branch reform. As Ian has pointed out, we have several years of audited accounts done. In terms of transparency and democracy, frankly, they're out of date by the time they come out. So we've got 3 years of audited accounts we're waiting for. We've got a government-inspired review based on the bailout, the so-called capitalisation, which has been, the follow-up review has been deferred post-election. We'll be interested to see what actually comes out of that. In terms of some of the basics, I've bored you by saying that, look, even in my privileged position, it is like getting blood out of a stone. I mean, I have so many requests from the finance department outstanding, and they're fairly large amounts. Millions, not hundreds of tens or hundreds of thousands outstanding. I mean, it really is in the Stone Age. And I mean, in terms of cash flow, I sit on the scrutiny committee and I put forward a proposal that we did something as radical, and I hope people in business will understand this, as actually scrutinising a cash flow statement on a quarterly basis. This was rejected by the Liberal Democrat majority on the scrutiny committee. I hope you recognise where we are with that. In terms of some of the actual numbers, I don't want to get too much into the numbers, but one of the big ones is, and I think one of my colleagues here has referred to it, one of the reasons why the council is so strapped in terms of capital expenditure is because they had a 20 million plus overrun on this project here. That's one point. Stephen talks about 5 million of savings. If I added up the amounts of savings that they've made over the last few years, there's no expenditure left. He talks about the rate support grant going. The government has changed the way. He doesn't talk about the variety of government grants. I don't personally actually agree with the way the government shells money out to local government, but we have to live with what they're doing at the moment. And certainly I, in my position, use every avenue I have to try to change the system to a fairer funding formula. But effectively, the government has actually put quite a lot of money into Eastbourne, of about 15 different grants and whatever, but all they talk about is the rate support grant. I tell you what we need is root and branch reform. Thank you.
I'm going to say two things. First of all, I think you need to look very carefully at the economics or the economy in Eastbourne and ask the question of who are the big spenders in Eastbourne, what big industries like the hospital, the education sector, maybe the Grand Hotel, and you need to argue, get them to start employing local businesses that employ local people, so that lots of the money that people spend here is not sucked out of the place, but reinvested in the place. And the second thing I want to say is, and you won't like to hear it again, you must create an environment where people who earn decent wages want to live. And quite honestly, with the traffic situation as it is, and many of the other things that you've pointed out tonight, that people, I mean, I don't come into Eastbourne. I don't spend money in Eastbourne. You should know that. And because it's not a very attractive place for me to come. And there must be other people like that. And I'm sorry, but you know, why don't you ask me where I do go and why I go there? You know. Yes, but standing for Eastbourne, I mean, I have to. Sorry.
No, all right, thank you.
No, I do like Eastbourne.
Susan, that's enough, thank you.
Let me finish. But I think a radical change is needed to restore the place to a place where many people want to live. And that means actually doing something about the traffic.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. We've come to the end of our evening now. We've gone past 9 o'clock, so I'm very sorry, but I can't take any more of your questions. I hope we set out to really inform each other, inform ourselves on what our candidates could bring. And you've certainly heard that this evening, haven't you? So, I'd like to... Thank you. I'd just like to thank our candidates. None of them knew about the questions that we were asking. So you did really well and appreciate you answering them so well. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you. Don't forget to vote. I'm sure you know exactly who you're going to vote for now. So good night and thank you very much. Yeah. Is that for us, Chris? Would you like to have your picture?